So, welcome, folks. Nice to see you here, and I'm sure you'll want to take some time after a bit to reintroduce yourselves to each other. For those of you who don't know me, I was at Viant London with Mr. Keeney there, among the others. After 2000, me and a bunch of Viant renegades went off and started Shazam, of which I landed up being CTO, which was my greatest hit. Among others there were Klaus Nemzo, Dheeraj Mukherjee, Christian Mitchell, Thomas Kleiman, Nai Schreiber, and so forth and so on. And then I landed up doing, over the years, consultancy with Dheeraj and Andreas Berner from Munich and Jim Dallas from here. And then I did CTO again with Jochen Doppelhammer from Munich. So it's been a lot of Viant over the years for me, mostly Viant London or Germany. Nowadays, I do a bunch of different things, quite a fair amount of pro bono work. I'm doing stuff on kidney transplants, drug predictions, do IoT, do a lot of hardware and software prototypes, and the Fediverse things on machine learning. And yes, I'm available for gigs. I also do weddings and bar mitzvahs, and that is the end of the commercial. So let us proceed with the Mastodon thing. And I just have to rearrange screens here so that I'm looking at you more or less as we go along. So most of you come here thinking you're going to hear about Mastodon, which you will. But actually, the real story is really about something else, and that's where the big exciting stuff comes in, at least I think. So let's just have a look, and before we start anything else, I'd like to get a word in from our sponsor. Come on, thank you, Mr. Musk, without whom none of us would be sitting here today, because you wouldn't have heard of Mastodon, nobody interested, it wouldn't have got any play from anybody. So thank you, Elon, you've really done great for the Fediverse. So let's just have a look at what the current landscape, sorry, I'm knocking on the door, somebody. The current landscape is for social media of all kinds. And the point really is that we've been boxed in. We all know this, we live with it. The value of these social media companies is the people. The technology at the end of the day is not that amazing. Most decent engineers could copy it fairly rapidly, despite all the glitzy stuff, apart from the enormous scale they have. But the point really is that the people are the value here. And they do an awful lot to try and box us in, make sure we can't move around, have got no choices. There is limited interaction about, like, show this on your Facebook, but I can't move accounts. I can't take people with me if I move somewhere else. But it's actually funny, because this is quite anomalous. If we look at other parts of our lives, it doesn't work like that. So, for example, if we look at the phone system, right, then we have a phone number, we go to a phone company and we buy minutes from them or whatever. But then if we don't like the company because their service is rubbish or something, then we can take our phone number and we can move to somewhere else, right? The fundamental reason that this is possible is all of this is sitting on a set of standards and protocols that are agreed between the phone companies, and they make up the worldwide phone system. So that, as I say, this is the social media thing is kind of anomalous as it stands at the moment. So if we look at another slightly closer to home internet view, email also works from a number of different companies, like Google, Microsoft, whoever, including companies who actually have their own email services. But again, that's because there's one more person coming in here, sorry. Right. Okay. No, at the start they weren't. But there's quite a lot of people here, so happy to talk in a bit. I should have introduced the format for this. I'm going to do about 15, hopefully 15 to 20 minutes of context setting. We're going to do some demos of Mastodon, and then we'll do the Q&A, because we've got kind of a lot of people here. So it will start to get mayhem if we all do stuff at once. So going back to this, we got standards and protocols around email. They've been there for an enormously long time, as long as the internet and before, in fact. Again, the big guys do try and box us in, and that's by giving you a gmail.com email address rather than your own domain name. With Google, by the way, you can just give them a domain name and they'll take that over, which means you're finally portable. But in principle, email accounts are portable between suppliers. So if we look at the fundamentals of what allows us to have portability, interoperability, and the sort of benefits from as a user, right? It's about sitting on standards and protocols. It's about that interoperability that allows us to be able to move between suppliers and not get boxed in the walled gardens that we've now been trapped into. And this is the fundamental thing about what we're talking today. So I've used that word, the Fediverse, and this is the whole point of talking today. Mastodon is really just one manifestation of a bunch of things on the Fediverse which talk to each other via a standard protocol called ActivityPub. All this has been here for quite a while. Mastodon's been around since 2016. And ActivityPub, actually the antecedents go back further than that, but that's a worldwide web consortium standard. This is a properly ratified standard. And it is like email is a protocol, and SMTP is a protocol for being able to transfer mail around places and knowing about email addresses and the format of them and what the conversations are. ActivityPub is a protocol that describes the interactions of social media, right? So ActivityPub talks about followers and shares and likes and boosts. Somebody else coming in. Hello, Chris. So that's the big concept. This is the message for today, right? What the Fediverse does is put social media back on a level playing field with the phone network or email or other things where we've got a federation and you can move between suppliers and platforms. This picture is it, basically. And so ActivityPub and the Fediverse are actually the big story. Mastodon just happens to have caught the headlines now. Sorry, backwards. Right. So let's just zoom in on Mastodon, because as I say, that's what you all came to hear about. So Mastodon itself is not one thing, one place, one anything. There are lots of Mastodons, right? Because this is a federation of services and of servers, right? There are actually lots of Mastodons you can join. The big original one is Mastodon.social, which was started by Eugen, who was the guy who wrote the original Mastodon software. But there's plenty of others, Mast.to, Mastodonapp.uk, which a lot of people in the UK are on, and indeed Mastodon.modernindustry.com, which is the one I set up, which most of you have actually joined. So the thing is that Mastodon is not one thing, and there are lots of them. Last count, I think there's close on 4,000 different servers that you could possibly join. But they all talk to each other. They can all look, like, follow, and you can move between them. You can pick up your account and take your followers with you to another server if you don't like it. And again, this is pretty much the big point about all of this. So Mastodon isn't a single site. It's not a single piece of software. There are other bits of software other than Mastodon that do fundamentally the same thing. If we go back a couple of slides, there is Mastodon on the left, but there's also PixelFed, which is a sort of Instagram equivalent-ish. There is PeerTube, which is a YouTube equivalent-ish. There is Pleroma, which is kind of another Mastodon, but different, right? So there are a bunch of different platforms, which all of which do somewhat different things, but have a common core of social media functionality. So, as I say, Mastodon was written by our German friend Eugen, whose second name I can't remember, which is a bit of a shame. But it's completely federated. You can move around, you can take your followers with you, you're not trapped on one place. It's not a single piece of software because it's been implemented a number of times, and other bits of software do different things of content and sharing and so forth. It's part of this larger ecosystem, and it's not new. It was originally written in 2016, as I said, and in fact, when this all came down because of the events on Twitter round about the end of last year, I hurried along to restart up, to go to Mastodon, sign up, and I discovered I'd actually been a member in 2017, at which point I'd forgotten about that. I went there, joined up to the UK site, and I remembered that I'd gone there and this large empty chamber with nobody in it, so I left again and forgot about it. The other thing to understand about Mastodon is it's not Twitter. Not only is it not Twitter, it's not really a replacement for Twitter. The mechanisms, the culture, and the organizations are different. It's a different place. It's got some commonality, as you will see, with Twitter, but not really comparable. And the community on Mastodon has sort of originally, when it all got very exciting last year, got even they got trapped into the idea that it's a substitute for Twitter. That's now died down, thankfully, and we're now in a place where we're looking at what we are trying to make, which is this cooperative system. There's also a thing, because after all, we're all commercial people and we come from that kind of world, about, so what is this going to do for businesses? Why is it relevant to businesses and brands? Well, a number of interesting things have happened that make it relevant, and companies are moving. One of the first to break was Tumblr. They're past their peak, but they are changing themselves into a Fediverse platform. Why would this be? Well, it means that they can get synergies with other platforms and software, right? A couple of weeks ago, Medium just decided to open up a Mastodon server, which means, if you look at that diagram, it means that Medium users can follow Tumblr users. Tumblr users can boost stories on Medium. And suddenly what you've got is the potential to get the smaller players together, synergizing into something that can genuinely compete with the big whales out there. From the point of view of other companies, there's very good reasons I'll cover in a second about why they should be there. And simply independence and insurance is a good thing about the vagaries of what the big social media companies might do. Elon's been wonderful in being so random, everybody's now somewhat spooked, and are at least now prepared to start thinking about what might happen if Twitter went away. On the left of that page, there's also another thing that's quite significant. Buffer, who I wasn't aware of previously, but apparently on one of the big social media management platforms. That's what people use, the big use to, hello, David. Welcome, David Rose. So the big social media management companies are using, provide these platforms so big companies can actually synchronize their productions on YouTube and on Instagram and whatever, and manage that stuff. Buffer has now fully implemented the Fediverse protocols, which means that if you're a big brand, Mastodon is in a peer situation to all the other channels that you have open to you. And I think that's pretty significant. It means one of the big players in this space has moved very quickly to take this on board. And it also means that kind of you can get more or less a free ride as a big brand because it's just another channel for you to go to. Going back through my modes. Right. So if we look at some of the upsides, as I said, for platforms, there's synergy with the smaller players. And also it lowers the entrance barriers to new players. There was no way any new player was ever going to challenge Twitter, right? Because they got that huge following. They're looking wobbly now, but very high barriers to entrance of anybody in social media. But as you now get a federated system, there's the possibility that all those small players add together to something much bigger. And of course, they're nimbler, they can change quicker, and they're offering unique niches to the issues of social media. For brands, and I put down Nike, it's not that Nike are doing anything, but it's easy to think about somebody like them because it takes very little to put up a Mastodon instance. The one I put up that most of you joined cost me £12 a month to run. It's like putting up WordPress, right? I didn't go the full hog because I was in a hurry to actually go through doing my own self-hosted side of things, but you can just buy a Mastodon server, right? And you can get it whatever size you want. And there's some new companies absolutely piling in providing this service, which means as another brand, you can just push a button and on the next day you've got a service. Get some branding on top of it and you're away. And we know that advertisers and brands in general are worried about getting hooked into toxicity, all kinds of unpleasant stuff that is beginning to surface back on Twitter. And indeed, they're sort of a bit worried about lots of the other social media platforms. Mr. Zuckerberg has got his head so far up his metaverse that you can't really see what he's doing. This is, originally when I did this, I had this sort of thing about a dinosaur moment, asteroid hitting, right? Suddenly things have changed. And there's an element of that. There's the idea that we've got huge layoffs because companies got bloated on cheap money. We've got Musk going potty. We've also got things like the EU getting its guns out to fire at the social media companies. And nobody's been really that comfortable, I think, or most people haven't been comfortable with the social and political impacts that these guys have had, right? And those have been fairly bad. So if you're looking at a company who are sitting, pondering what's been happening, and as I say, Twitter is really the first and most egregious example of this, but it's not isolated. If I was running a company today, the idea that I can have an independent platform that is still federated into everything else, where I have full editorial control, right? Where I can make sure that the bad guys don't start pushing stuff out, and I can make sure that nobody starts slagging off my brand. And not only that, you can take Mastodon software, put all kinds of marketing material. You've got as much advertising and marketing real estate as you want, and you're not going to have to charge for it. You don't get charged for it. So that sounds pretty reasonable. There's a very low cost to entry, low risk, insurance against weird stuff happening everywhere else, and the potential for getting synergy across the board. And for users, we kind of touched on that a little while ago. There's mobility. If you don't like where you are, if you don't like the editorial policy of a server, you can go, right? Also, because it's sort of community based, there isn't any advertising per se. And in fact, the culture is, I wouldn't say anti-advertising, but if companies want to go and penetrate that space for marketing purposes, they do need to be somewhat careful. The culture is fairly woke, and I wouldn't say massively anti-capitalist, but people are sensitive about this kind of thing because they're certainly fed up with what they've been pushed up until now. But if people sort of take on board what my guru, Seth Godin, has said about permission marketing, about making sure people are asking you for information about their products and have given you permission to send them stuff, then I think it's a very fertile place to be. And it's very easy to work with. The other thing for users is there isn't the nonsense algorithms that are more and more pushing stuff we're not actually that interested in, but are about creating mayhem, anger, all kinds of engagement, or in the case of an older guy like me, getting a lot of bikini-clad women thrust at me on Facebook all the time. So, but the biggest point about this is mobility, right? There is no way anybody can own Mastodon. There was a few weeks ago, one of the big Japanese servers, there's a lot of Far Eastern Mastodon activity, announced they'd been bought by one of the crypto companies. And the response was, what? Because the people are the value. On Mastodon, they've got mobility. They can just up sticks and go. So what have you bought if you buy a server? There isn't anything. So it's already people piled in and bought something that kind of is vapor or could be vapor. So yes, maybe they'll make money out of it, but the thing is that they've actually got to go with the flow, and they can't suddenly hair off in the direction of toxic material or egregious advertising, because people will simply leave. They'll go somewhere else. There are some downsides. We've got a reasonable amount of rubbish press lately, and I think that what we're seeing at the moment is going through a very rapid version of hype cycle, because people panicked. All the kinds of rubbish happened last November when Musk bought into Twitter. There was 1,000 people an hour plus joining up on Mastodon. Sometimes it was peaking even farther than that. There's a graph. Maybe we'll see it in a bit when we look at actually my Mastodon site, where every hour or so they publish how many people are joining, how many servers there are, and so forth. And I've christened it the Elonometer, right? Because every time he does something stupid, you see the membership spike, right? It's brilliant. And the last thing, which was really stupid, I don't know how many of you are aware of it, was that he started charging for usage of the API, which meant all the people who'd supplied interesting bots that were feeding interesting material into Twitter now stopped. The week before, without no warning whatsoever, he switched off all the third-party clients on Twitter, right? Which the people who are really active were devoted to, right? So these actions may look like, to him, I suppose, a way of clamping down on leakage of revenue and making people pay for stuff. But what it's actually done is driven a whole bunch of very talented developers to move on to Mastodon. The people who are doing the third-party clients have pretty much moved en masse. And so we've got all these companies who've got a lot of experience in making really, really nice clients for social media, and they've all turned up on the Mastodon world. And similarly, the people who are making bots and various things, not the toxic ones, but the stuff that's giving you weather reports and news feeds and everything else, they've turned up as well. And that was the last surge we saw. But as I say, the downsides currently, and maybe permanently, one thing is it's purely getting their heads around the fact that this is a different kind of space. It's not just let's move over and it's Twitter. It just isn't that. Right. The whole thing about multiple servers kind of spooks people. There is some, and that's part of a general thing about onboarding, which is being addressed. There's a lot of active conversation about changing some of the big platforms so they got better onboarding in general. And in fact, CalKey, which is the latest platform, which just kind of came out of nowhere, that works an awful lot better. I went through their onboarding. Another thing is the idea of self-curation. There is no algorithm. There is no algorithm pushing stuff at you. If you've got an account and you sit there, nothing will happen. You have to go and follow people and just start exploring, right? But which is a brilliant thing if you think about it, but it's again not a concept people are really used to at this point. And they're trying to get their heads around the idea it's a fragmented society, like phone companies. Well, how do I choose a phone company? Well, many of us look at a variety of things, or maybe we just stick our fingers in the air and choose one. It's not that difficult, but again, the fact that it's not a monolith really does scare people. It's got the press making all kinds of noises and so forth. And for some reason, people think it's complex, but it doesn't look really much. When you get there, it's really not much more complex than any of the other social media. And to be honest, I speak as someone who's never mastered Instagram. So what's that all about? I think the big story is not Mastodon, and it's not a replacement for Twitter. It's the idea of federated systems that give people people and companies independence and mobility, which kind of breaks down the existing paradigm of what these things are like. It was kind of going to happen at some point or another. I mean, remember that social media companies simply don't last forever. Remember MySpace? Right? And a whole bunch of other ones. We've all been around enough times that we've seen these come and go. These companies aren't going to last forever. And the thing is, when they get very big, they can't cater to all their communities and all the needs. What you can do when you have a federated system is you can get niche players who are producing different interesting things, but you've still got the underlying platform that pulls them all together and means that I can admire something on an art site or look at, steam train engine noises or whatever, or engage in different kinds of media. Even, God help us, the metaverse, there's no reason it wouldn't be a federated system. Final stuff. There are a few resources that are worth looking at. You could, but there's an awful lot if you just look at Mastodon for beginners. There's tons of stuff, so I'm not going to go into it. But Join Mastodon is one good place to look at. That has lists of servers and it's got a list of apps. They are changing all the time. Most of you probably iOS users. The new kid on the block shiny thing is called Ivory. But there's just a ton of apps that access this stuff. There's a place I go to a lot, which is Fediverse, which is just a stream of general beginners tips and so forth. And there on GitHub, there's somebody who's got a living document, which is a guide to Mastodon. So if you'll just bear with me while I reassemble my my windows and bring you down here. Let's get the right one here. Embarrassing, isn't it? Oh, this is probably going to give me a... There we go. So this is... Oop. Try and... That wasn't what I wanted to do. Right. Okay, so here is Mastodon.modern industry, which is where many of you have landed up, but understandably not done very much. One thing that many people do, and this is the website, this is the basic web interface. As I said, there's apps that allow you to do this, but actually I use the web interface pretty much because I'm comfortable with it, and also because it's got all the admin stuff on it for managing the site. Many people, me included, actually change this to the advanced view, which people tell me is like TweetDeck, but I've never used it. So you can change this to advanced web interface, and if we do that, then you will get a sort of multi-paneled version. So we do tend to advise people to do that thing. So this is kind of where it all happens on the top. And this is my home timeline. And fundamentally, as I said, nothing will get there unless you put it there. There is no algorithm pushing you content. But what you do have is the people you followed, the answers you've got, all of that kind of thing. So that is your personally curated stream. The next bit in the hierarchy is what we call the local timeline, which is showing up here. And yes, Mr. Schmidt, it is on. This is posts from people on this server, right? So this is where the local community forms, right? This is all about people here. That is the only thing about a server, is that it pulls together people on that server. On the very big, the very big servers are in the 100,000 plus range. But the whole idea with the Fediverse is that people are avoiding making very big servers because you start to lose the sense of community. Some of the big ones have even turned off open membership and are guiding people to go to smaller servers so that it evens out the size. And so what we've got is a village rather than a huge metropolis. So the local timeline is purely about stuff that's been said here, and mostly it's me, as you might notice, which is unsurprising because I've been at all the activity. So the local timeline is everything on this server, and so you can see what other people have been doing, what they've been saying, and who they've been interacting with. And finally, and this is where I have to switch back here, there is the federated timeline. This one's a bit more difficult to get your head around, but the federated timeline is a stream of messages from all the servers that anybody on this server is following. Right? I'll say that again because it does take a little bit of getting around. The federated timeline, it is basically not the entire Fediverse coming at you, but it's a pretty large chunk of the Fediverse. Basically, all the servers, it's from all the servers that anybody here is following. Okay, that can get pretty busy, as you might imagine, but it's possibly somewhere to go when you're starting out to just get a very a good slice of what's going on and start to follow and boost people. What else to talk about here? You've got a thing for your settings, which you just saw me access before. So there's a bunch of things you can do. And again, by design, blocking people from hassling you is a pretty big part of what this is about. For the last few years, before the the great Twitter migration, Mastodon's really been a place of safety for a lot of marginalized groups. So all gay and trans people, a lot of people with more left-wing political views. So it was designed to make sure that marginalized people couldn't get bullied as they are elsewhere. So I won't go through all those security settings because I'm trying to keep us moving fairly quickly because we can get to some quick Q&A. But those are the things. If we go here, right, in getting started, you can go through exploration, which is where you will see interesting posts that are trending, hashtags that are trending. You can follow hashtags as well as people, by the way, which is something I recommend. So this, let's State of the Union, right? That's the State of the Union hashtag. There's stuff that's coming over it, and that little sign there means I can follow that hashtag, and I will see stuff that is on the hashtag State of the Union. And there's sort of news, which you don't have a huge amount of. This Wired, you may well see this Wired reference to this Wired article about people leaving Mastodon. But as I say, if you look at the article and you look at the graph they show, it looks almost identical to the much famed hype curve. Obviously, we've got a huge boost, and obviously your retention goes down over time, but this is flattening out. And now we're starting to hit the point where this thing is building in a more organic way than just the flood of people who came in a rush. At least that's my opinion. And I think that's the community's opinion as well. Nobody's particularly panicking about this. What we did is we went from 300,000 accounts to 9.3 million in just a couple of months. And obviously not all of that sticks, right? But what it has left us with is, from what was not a completely viable society, community, or at least only for some certain minorities of whom enough were there, this is now much more rounded out, viable community, which I think will probably last. So strategies for joining up and starting to get moving is dependent on the fact that there's really no algorithm pushing stuff at you. I've said it a few times. What it means is the thing to do is simply go out, start following people, start boosting other people's content, and just do lots of it, and then start curating what you got and changing things. You'll see stuff that other people you followed have boosted, and then you can just organically find your way through and curate. It's worth pointing out that the star here, that somebody starred one of my posts, right? The like, that's all it does. It just tells the person on the other end that you like what they said. It has no other effect, right? Which is pleasant. It means you just got a way of just liking something, but it doesn't. There is no algorithm for that to be taken on board, and it has no other effect. This one here, right? That is the boost button, and that means you've reposted you've retweeted it in Twitter speak. By the way, there are no quote tweets, and that's by design, because it was used to such a large extent to hassle people that there was a strong reaction against implementing quote tweets. It can easily be done, and sort of reconsidering it, and people are arguing about it all the time. But that's something that isn't on Mastodon. There were a number of sites where you can find people who you knew on Twitter and where they are on Mastodon. Because Musk switched off the APIs, or is I think just about to, if you're going to use these sites, you should do them now, because you simply won't be able to do it in another week or so. I can't remember when he's shutting these things off. However, it's not readily appreciated that, in fact, Google indexes all Mastodon sites, or at least all the ones that allow Google to do that, which is most of them. So you can actually do a Google search for Mastodon and me, and you will see, in fact, oh no, I better not switch that one off. Do that. Have we got the right one? Coming up, yeah. So if you do, lo and behold, here I am. So a Google search is a pretty good way to find people who you know from other places on Mastodon. I think that probably does it as a quick intro, because we could sit here all night and talk, and I can try and explain stuff to you, but I think we should pretty much move on to a bit of conversation, and that I will now do by switching here, and hopefully I will move. If you give me a second, I will stop the horrible lag that I've got. I'm going to switch this off. And I'm back, and hopefully my voice and my face working together now. Can somebody give me a thumbs up to say this is so? Nobody's saying anything. Somebody? No? All right. Well, but you can. All right. Let me shut down OBS completely. I think that's because it's OBS is off. Okay, so who wants to talk? Sounds like Alcoholics Anonymous, doesn't it? You're all muted. I think I can unmute you. Obviously, or have you muted yourselves?
Or a few questions in the comment thread. Maybe start there.
Okie doke. Oh, bloody hell, we have, haven't we? Right, from the top. Yeah, mobile phones weren't interoperable, but another wonderful thing the EU did is it established international standards, GSM. I do remember in the States when I was living there in the 80s, if you drove from New York, Manhattan to New Jersey, you were already roaming, which was pretty awful stuff. Yep, Ivory for iOS. Yes, that's the new hot thing for iOS. People are saying that's very good, but there's lots of other stuff. You'll find that on Fedi Tips. Cindy, when you expose a hashtag, is that throughout the Fediverse? No, if you're following a hashtag, that is everywhere, right? That will go everywhere. You will get. So if you follow a hashtag, that is across the Fediverse.
Thank you.
Michael, how to publish? You mean type stuff in here and push the button? Yeah. I suppose one thing I want to show you is, in fact, the privacy settings. And that is when you do publish, you've got a choice of how visible your post is. Public means it will appear on all the timelines that you've got that people are interested in. Unlisted is generally what I do for the second post, because if you're replying to somebody, unlisted means it's still available to everybody, but it's not going to appear on the public timeline. So the timelines don't get cluttered up with out of context comments. Followers only is pretty obvious, and mention people only is fundamentally a direct message. Oh, so I don't know whether you'd be looking at this. This is from David Rose. Is there a Dunbar's number for Mastodon, who said that beyond 150 people, social groups lose their ability to fundamentally use their ability to function effectively. It's not obvious, but we certainly can see platforms that have outgrown their ability to form coherent or stable societies. So how big is it for Mastodon? I don't know. There's a long tail of smaller instances. It seems, but people are conscious of this fact. What we have is that Mastodon.social, which has become fairly sizable, 100,000 or odd, is actively discouraging people from it getting any bigger, right? The servers are actually deliberately trying to make sure that these stay like villages or at least small towns. Basic steps to set up a brand on Mastodon. Don't know. We don't know because not many people have done it yet. Although, for example, Raspberry Pi has done that, right? They did something rather brilliant. If you know what a Raspberry Pi is, it's a tiny computer. I've got a variety of them here. That is a Raspberry Pi, right? That's a Linux box, believe it or not, in a stick of gum. So the Raspberry Pi folks piled in fairly quickly, and they're running their Mastodon instance on a Raspberry Pi, which is pretty cool. And they got their evangelists regularly posting, and you can go on their site. I'm not sure how many people they've actually got on their Mastodon instance. It doesn't really matter because lots of people are following them, right? And so that's something to remember, that the server you're on does form a certain amount of community, but in fact, very soon you've got tendrils going out across the Fediverse. And so it's a local space where people might get together, or it's like the UK ones are mainly UK, and the Korean ones are full of anime, right? But you spread out across depending on what you're looking at. So it's very early days for brands on Mastodon. This is kind of the reason I'm doing this. Is kind of one of these things is to evangelize about getting companies on Mastodon, because I think that what's going to make it stick inevitably is when people start putting money into it and we see the big brands turning up, and they are doing that. I mean, fundamentally all you have to do is start a server, which is about as difficult as making a WordPress site, slap some branding on it from your Marcom people, and start pushing content at it. But be conscious of the fact that it's a reasonably woke, lefty kind of place currently, and may stay like that. Raspberry Pi, God bless them, completely blew this. I wrote a little piece that said you got to respect the culture and realize who's here and who's the people who've come, and they blew it first week. Brilliant, because they announced very proudly that one of their new software evangelist people on the Raspberry Pi used to be a surveillance person for the cops. There was mayhem. They really got complete, and they had a completely insensitive reaction to it as well. They really blew that. They're still in a lot of people's bad books. So it's important to realize it is not the kind of place that we've got on other social media. It's not as toxic, but people will get jolly angry at you if you start bringing in what they consider to be the enemy. It was. I hope they get past that, because I'm very fond of that brand, and you can see I've got lots of their stuff around here. But it's worth being sensitive to that kind of culture. It's the exact mirror of the alt-right channels. Brenda, boosting, is that like a viral push? It's purely like retweeting. I think that's the easiest way to think of it. It's a retweet. Hank. Hello, Hank. Not seen you for 20 years. Where are you? We did Deutsche Bank together. God. With Caroline Ruart and all the rest. Yep. So the question is, am I right in thinking that ActivityPub would allow me to set up some data service like weather, which could then be accessed from any application, Mastodon or otherwise? There is absolutely an app framework for Mastodon. I have written already a couple of them myself. In fact, I've hooked up, my IoT systems to there. If you want a low-code solution to sending Mastodon messages, then Node-RED, which was actually from IBM, is a drag and drop system that can send Mastodon messages and can take inputs from all kinds of things. But there's also there's a variety of bots. Ars Technica have run a bot that does a retweet from all their tweets. So there's very much APIs. The only thing about bots is the protocol is declare yourself a bot account, and it should be marked as such. But that's the only thing. There's plenty of them out there doing all kinds of different things. Some of the mainstream media outlets who haven't yet hooked in, actually, there's people taking their feeds and just channeling it back into Mastodon. So there's plenty of that kind of stuff going on. The API, as I say, are well documented, and there's a variety of libraries and bindings to various languages. Setting up a hashtag feed. That's an interesting question. I'm not sure what it means. John, can you explain?
Well, just in like a tweet deck, you might have a hashtag column in the interface you were just showing. You might have a dedicated news feed around a hashtag, for example.
Yeah, there's a variety of things, not all of which I've explored considerably. The hashtags will just turn up on your home feed, but there's also a thing called lists, which if I go to
That's probably it.
Yeah, which, oh God, now where am I going? I've lost it. I don't want to exit. Yeah, I have lost it in this interface. There is a thing called lists that allow you to construct more structure stuff, because once you've got a lot of feed coming through, then you need a way of sorting that out so you can see what's being done. I think the lists are about that. Modern Industry, that's my company. It's my one-man consultancy. What is it about? Well, it actually, when you joined up, it says it's for colleagues, friends, strays, waifs and strays that I know or who know me. It's just something I put up. Maybe I'll get more coherent about what it's supposed to be as a community. But the 50 of you are people who've been in the industry a lot of times. We've gone through the mill of all-in-one management consultancy. So we've kind of defined a community already by the people who are here now. So it's not political. It's not particularly queer. It's subscribes to all the other things that people say, which is about being nice to them and not nasty. And it's whatever you make it, basically. When hopefully you get active, what it will be is shaped by the things and people you follow. That's what will turn up. Brenda, server's able to be.
Hey, Mike, for recording purposes, you might read the questions out loud.
Yeah, sure. No, absolutely. So are servers able to be in danger of becoming separate clubs, exclusive? You can't get in unless somebody inside is following you. So Mike's server village is most desirable and where I want to be, but he's closed it and now I can't get my message into that crowd without getting someone there to follow me. Yeah, they can be managed like that. But that's the point. Server admins can put whatever rules in place they want. They can put whatever management controls they want to put in place. This one here, just for caution, is currently you have to get a membership application approved. Other people are open. There's other ways to do it. So yeah, this is for friends and relations. Many others are completely open. It just depends on what policies the admins pursue. It's worth pointing out that with 4,000 servers, it's almost certainly the case that the Mastodon community have vastly more moderation in place than Twitter or probably any of the other social networks at this point, because they're shedding them like that. Because it's a bunch of people who have defined their village, their values, their principles, right? And there are people safeguarding those, and the community as a whole can report somebody and you have to deal with the issue. You will find there is a report this post, right? Report this person. If that happens, the admin can ban those people completely from that server. And if it gets really bad, where we found some, already found some alt-right and bonkers people around, they can defederate the whole server. You can cut, the community as a whole, all the Fediverse can cut a server out of the Fediverse, right? And so there are mechanisms for making sure that contagion doesn't spread too badly. But and as I said, in answer to Brenda's question, the thing is, yes, some of them are closed clubs, some of them are not, just like any other place in the real world. John Stone, are we automatically following everybody on your server? No, you are not. You're all following me because I checked a box that said you're following me when you join, just so that I've got a way of saying stuff to you. There's also an announcement channel you could be following, but no, you follow other people. Just look at the local timeline, and if you see somebody who said something interesting, start following them, right? Any others? Now that I think I've exhausted the chat channel. Oh, come on, there must be something. Cat, got your tongues?
There's a new question in the...
All right, sorry. Oh, jolly good. Then the Brenda, the Google indexes Mastodon. I'm not quite sure what their policies are for doing it. It was just somebody actually pointed out, because there's a big debate going on about whether there should be global search in the Fediverse, right? Because people are a bit cautious of that, again, because of the amount of trolling that went on, so getting chased around the Fediverse. So there's a balance between being able to be found and being able to be not found. And then somebody pointed out that Google's indexing all the servers anyway, so it's kind of a moot point. But that's Google indexing. I can switch off Google indexing on any given on this server. I haven't chosen to do that because I don't think there's anything too serious there, and nobody's likely to get trolled. Your mileage may vary in other places.
The reason I asked the question is I'm imagining, let's say all 4,000 servers tend to be very closed systems, but for business purposes or communication purposes, let's say I want to make bridges between all 4,000. As an individual, I want to be able to be present on all of those feeds. I would need to contact at least one person on each server to get them to follow me. So I imagine for business, or if you're going to get in there somehow and try to communicate, it sounds like it's pretty labor intensive. You'd have to do that.
Yes and no. And the point is, if you're saying something sufficiently attractive, people will retweet you, right? So it's not that you. So yeah, there's that point about there are limits to connectivity, and deliberately so. They're to try and stop toxic behavior spreading. But again, let's take maybe Nike trying to penetrate the market. It's like, they put out a set of offers to people, and somebody starts sharing the offers saying, oh, look, we got 25% off these ridiculous things that they make, and somebody said, oh god, I'm going to tell my friends about that. So there's the virality works just the same as anywhere else, but there isn't the ability to just blast a broadcast at everybody, and that's deliberately so.
So once somebody once somebody boosts your message, they're not necessarily following you permanently, but that message itself could be transmitted.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And it'll go to all the people who follow you, right, and various other places. So, I mean, this is all stuff to explore and get your head around. Just try it, right? Mm-hmm. But the virality works just fine. And I mean, as you can see, there's plenty of traffic on my server, and I'm the only person doing anything. In fact, there's a number of versions of Mastodon that are designed as single-person instances, right? They're designed as a single-person presence on the Fediverse. That's it, right? They're mostly managed by you. They're not really for a bunch of people. So that allows, so that gives you an idea that traffic comes in from everywhere. Once you start following stuff, then you'll see stuff that those people boosted, and then you say, oh, well, that's interesting, I'll follow them, and you follow the chain. So very rapidly stuff goes around if people are interested. I mean, it's worth saying what kinds of, I think something that's interesting about Mastodon people don't appreciate is kind of the quality of the folks who turned up. It's not a bunch of idiots. It's not a bunch of techies. I mean, there's a lot of techies there, obviously, but there's a lot of artists and writers, scientists, medical people, all kinds of fairly quality people who I believe are kind of thought leaders anyway. So there's a lot of jolly good photography. There's an enormous number of cats. Saturday is Cataday. But so it's actually just a really interesting place to be. There's a number of people I've known in other social media who are there, but I've just actually made a lot of really interesting connections already, right, with these folks. So I think the community as a whole is pretty interesting, but you have to have a lot of, you're going to have to put up with a reasonable amount of moderately left-wing behavior, but hopefully people aren't too upset about that. And in the UK, people don't like the Tories. Anyway, Michael, bye-bye. I assume you've gone already. Anything else from folks? I think this is pretty good going. It's 3 minutes past 8, so somehow I've managed to time this all right. Anything? Anybody for anything? Bye bye, Stephen. Is that it? How many left? Right, we've got 8 people left. I can see you all, and you. So
Since
I
just
think.
a few of us, Mike. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Quick question, just on you had said on the list thing. So I just maybe this is a small technical thing. So I like the Viant hashtag. I used it. I clicked on it. It brings up a column in the interface, which is like a feed, which is great. But then if I change that at all, if I follow another hashtag, it replaces that. So I guess the question is, can you make that column sticky? Let's say the Viant hashtag.
That's a good question. I'm not quite sure what you mean. I think the thing to do is probably explore, because we're sort of running out of time.
Okay.
I mean,
Maybe I can pin it.
I think that.
I think I just found it. Pin it. You can pin it. I found it.
Yeah, good, lovely. Oh yeah, you can pin things. Right, yeah. Okay then. I think that we've exhausted everybody. Certainly myself. I need a glass of wine and I have to make some kedgeree. Otherwise, I'm going to be in trouble. So thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you, Mike.
Much
Thank you, Mike.
appreciated.
Really appreciate it.
Hopefully,
Very
I
interesting.
managed to convey some information, and I hope you enjoyed it. And maybe we'll see each other again another 20 years or so, or maybe sooner.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. I will
Bye.
post. I will be posting a link to the recording, I hope, if Google and the gods help me. All right. Bye bye.